بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakum khair for joining us, inshallah, for another session in our Al-Mustafa series, talking about the Seerah of our beloved Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Inshallah, today we'll talk more about the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and some of the events that occurred a little bit prior to his birth, during his birth, after his birth, his naming, and inshallah ta'ala, as much as we can get through today. So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi ya ayyuha alladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. So first and foremost, I want to address a question that was asked last week that I told that I wasn't familiar with the answer of it, so I wanted to do some research and give the answer this week, inshallah. And the question had to do with Abdul Muttalib. So Abdul Muttalib, according to many scholars, is considered to be a Hanif, right? It's considered to be one of the Hunafa of the time before the Prophet ﷺ, meaning he was a monotheist. Now, to be fair, this is a discussion of difference of opinion. Not all the scholars say that he is a monotheist. Some actually say that he was not a monotheist. And their evidence is this idea that Abu Lahab, who was one of the children of Abdul Muttalib, because he is the uncle of the Prophet Muhammad, is named Abdul Uzza. That's his real name, Abdul Uzza, not Abu Lahab. His nickname Abu Lahab is actually another name that was given to him. But Abdul Uzza was his real name. And so how is it that Abdul Muttalib will be considered a monotheist if he named his child Abdul Uzza? This is a very good question. Very good question. It's the evidence that the other group of scholars will bring to say that he is not a monotheist. Now, the response to this, inshallah ta'ala, piecing everything together, essentially that during the time of the Arabs, and you'll see this actually today with the name of the Prophet Muhammad himself as well, that during the time of the Arabs, it was very common that both the father and the mother will name the child. Understood? So both the father and the mother will name the child. So the father will have one name for the child, and the mother will sometimes have another name for the child. So the father, Abdul Muttalib himself, named his child Abu Lahab. Did not name his child Abdul Uzza. So Abu Lahab, the reason why he was called Abu Lahab, which means father of flames, is because Abu Lahab as a child, he had very red, rosy cheeks. So he was called Abu Lahab, right? And also, it was a custom of the Arabs to name their children very strong names, right? Father of flames, Harb, right? War, like all these kind of things. And the Prophet ﷺ came and said you shouldn't name your children these very strong, intense names, right? But Abu Lahab is named Abu Lahab, and Wallahu ta'ala alam, but it seems that his mother is the one that named him Abdul Uzza. Wallahu ta'ala alam bis-sawab. Now, we got into the birth of Rasulullah ﷺ, but just wanted to touch on it again, that before the arrival of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, we need to again understand the world before he was born. There's a very, very beautiful story of Salman al-Farsi, which we will get to, inshallah ta'ala, when we talk about the Madani period. But Salman al-Farsi, he was an individual who sought the truth. And so he bounced from teacher to teacher to teacher to teacher. And when he was with his final teacher before the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and his teacher was on his deathbed, he was so confused, he was so worried about where to go next. So his teacher tells Salman radiallahu anhu that you should go, there's nowhere else in the world for you to go to guidance. There's no guidance left in this world. However, go to this city. And he described a city like Medina. And he said, if you go to a city that looks like this, wait there, and there you will find the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And there's a very beautiful narration as well, where Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, he speaks to the king, Najashi, when there's a hijrah to Abyssinia. And he talking to the king, Najashi, and says that we were qawman ahl jahiliyyah, that we were a people of ignorance. We had so much darkness. We were ignorant people. There was no focus. There was no vision. Na'bud al-asnam. We were people that would worship idols. We would eat and Maita, and we would kill our children, we would take care of dogs, the strong would eat from the weak. People were getting into haram relationships, people were worshiping idols. Tawheed had been completely erased from the community. Even mention the word God or word Allah or mention Tawheed, then people are going to frown at you, people are going to look at you funny. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is this light that was sent to a dark room. If you imagine a dark room and you light a candle and this bright candle shines in all the corners of the room, this is who Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was, and this is where he was sent to. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sent to a place that was isolated. Right? The Jahiliyyah there that was contaminated to another level. The Jahiliyyah there looked different than the Jahiliyyah that was during the time of the Persians or the Romans. They had Jahiliyyah as well, but the Jahiliyyah in Al-Hijaz was on another level. Rasulullah ﷺ was born to the people of Mecca on a Monday of Rabi' al-Awwal. And Rasulullah ﷺ, we know this because he told us which day, this is the day on which I was born, and this is the day on which divine revelation was revealed to me. And this was after he was asked by a Arab Bedouin, what do you advise about fasting on Mondays? And so Rasulullah ﷺ celebrated his birthday by fasting on Mondays. He was born in the year of the elephants, Aam al-Fil, and we talked about the incident of the elephants last week, which happened 50 or 55 days before the birth of Rasulullah ﷺ. And there's such significance of the day of Monday. You know, the Muslim Imam Ahmad Abdullah bin Abbas has a narration where he talks about some special things that happened on a Monday. So the Prophet ﷺ was born on a Monday. Divine revelation was revealed to him on a Monday. So the prophethood was given to him on a Monday. During Hijrah, he left Mecca on a Monday. He arrived to Medina on a Monday. He passed away on a Monday, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When the Kaaba was being renovated, the Hajar al-Aswad, the black stone, was placed inside the Kaaba on Monday. Right? And we study Seerah when? On Mondays. MashaAllah, look at us. Allahu Akbar. So people hate on Mondays, but MashaAllah, there's a lot of blessings on Mondays. Allahu Akbar. And it's also said in many tafasir that the verse اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا, the verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, today I have perfected your religion for you, I have completed my favor upon you, and I have chosen Islam as your way of life, as your religion. That this verse was actually revealed on a Monday as well. Now in the Gregorian calendar, the Prophet's birth occurred in April in the year 571. Right, this is in the Gregorian calendar. So at this point, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his father has already passed away. We talked about that last week, how he went on a business trip, and then on his way back, he fell ill, and he was in Medina, and he passed away in Medina. And the birth of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was very unique. It was very special. His mother Amina explains that her experience being pregnant, she didn't even know she was pregnant. And for most of her pregnancy, she didn't even know she was pregnant. It was that easy, that light. She just knew that my menstruation stopped for many months and I didn't know what was going on. And she would talk about how other women would talk about how much of a burden pregnancy is. And so Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she would say, life was not difficult. He was not a burden on me. Other women would complain about back pain, complain about vomiting, but these things didn't happen to me. I would be walking and I would hear voices saying, Assalamu alaikum ya Rasulullah. And imagine how powerful this must have been for Amina, who's somebody who's just an average everyday person, like all of us. And then she turned out to be the mother of the greatest individual, the greatest makhluk of Allah that has ever been created, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She would say that I would see a light that would emanate from me. And this light would emit from me, and I would see the palaces of Sham light up. And so one day, actually, in a dream, the mother of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she saw a dream and she was being addressed by angels. And some of the scholars say that most likely the angel that was addressing her was Jibreel alayhi salam. And this angels, and some of the angel comes to her and says, فقيل لها إنك قد حملت بسيد هذه الأمة. That you are about to give birth. You are carrying the leader of this ummah. فإذا وقع إلى الأرض فقولي. So when he arrives on this earth, say, أعيذوه بالواحد من شر كل حاسد في كل بر عامد وكل عبد رائد نزول غير ذلك فإنه عبد الحميد الماجد حتى أراه قد أتى المشاهد. Right? That when he arrives on this earth, say, I put him in the protection of Allah. Protect him. May Allah protect him from those who are jealous. May he be put in the care and company of good and righteous people. May he be put under the mentorship and confidence of the slaves of Allah who are leaders of the devout. May he arrive to this earth without any adversity because he is the slave of Al-Hamid, the one who is constantly worthy of praise, and Al-Majid, the one who is glorious and magnificent. Until he witnesses that which he is to witness, meaning that he receives prophethood. And then it goes on, the narration continues, it says that the sign of his birth will be that when he arrives on this earth, along with him a nur will come, a light will come. And that light will fill up the palaces of Sham. And when he is born, name him Muhammed. Because his name in the Torah was Ahmad. The people of the heavens and the people of the earth praise him. His name in the Injil was Ahmad. And his name in the Quran that will be revealed to him will be Muhammad. And Rasulullah was asked by his companions, tell us about your beginning. And he says, Ana da'watu Abi Ibrahim. I am the dua of my forefather Ibrahim alayhi salam. Wa ana bushra Isa. That I am the glad tidings of Isa alayhi salam. Where Isa alayhi salam, he says to his people that مبشرا برسول يأتي من بعدي اسمه أحمد. That there will come a prophet after me, a messenger whose name will be Ahmad. And so now Rasulullah is born in the early hours of the morning. And while Amina is giving birth to her beloved son and our beloved Nabi Sallallahu again, as we mentioned, the palaces of Sham lit up. And Imam Nawawi, rahimahullah, when commenting on this narration, he says that the reason this is because it shows that Islam will reach there and it will remain there and be a hub of Islam. And not only that, but this will be the place where the army rises against the Dajjal. So the place of Sham is a very amazing place for us Muslims. And so the midwife of the mother of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, her name was Fatima bint Abdullah. She narrates and she says the scene of what happened when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam first entered this world. That he planted his hands on the ground and he took some soil in his hand, he balled it up in a fist. He lifted his forehead to the sky and he lowered himself all the way to the ground as if he was in sajda. And there was a light that emitted where the entire area became bright and everything had become beautiful. And in that moment, the greatest creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our beloved Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, has entered this world. And there are also two other women who assisted Amina in her childbirth. There's one woman by the name of Ash-Shifa, who was the mother of Abdurrahman ibn Auf, and also the mother of Uthman ibn Abi al-As. Both assisted Amina in her childbirth. So Amina gives birth, and the mother of Uthman says that she was blinded by the nur in that house. That she looked up and there was an opening in the ceiling of the house. That she could see the stars coming closer to witness the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She said that the stars were so close that Ash-Shifa was afraid that some of the stars might fall on her, so she ran away. And when the Prophet was born, at that moment, someone said, may Allah have mercy upon you. And after that incident, Amina sent Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Abdul Muttalib. Because Abdul Muttalib is the one who was going to take care of the family. Abdul Muttalib was the one who was taking care of Amina after the death of Abdullah. And so before giving birth, Amina called her father-in-law, Abdul Muttalib, to tell him about her dreams. And Abdul Muttalib told her to just stay calm, stay steadfast. Because after Rasulullah ﷺ was born, Abdul Muttalib was called for. And since he was the male guardian of the child, and he was informed about the Noor, he wanted to take the newborn Muhammad ﷺ to the Kaaba, and he made dua. And Amina told her father-in-law, because of the dreams that I had, this child needs to be named Muhammad. And there's other narrations about this. Another narration states that it was actually Abdul Muttalib's own inclination to name the child Muhammad. Another narration says that Abdul Muttalib named the child Muhammad, but Amina preferred the name Ahmad. So the Prophet actually had both names. Again, as we mentioned in the beginning, this was common amongst the Arabs, that a father would name their child one thing and the mother would name their child another thing. So he had both names, Muhammad and Ahmad, which he is called both in the Quran. So no problem. Rasulullah ﷺ was born without a fatherly figure. He was born an orphan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of the wisdoms of him pulling out these figures from his life at a young age was in order to establish that none of the wisdom that was given to Rasulullah ﷺ was passed down. No one can come and say that his father taught him this religion, or Abdul Muttalib taught him this religion, or Amina taught him this religion. So we'll see that very quickly these figures in the life of Rasulullah ﷺ are going to be removed one by one. So Abdul Muttalib, the grandfather, enters the Kaaba, and he makes dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he makes a lot of dua, and he names him Muhammad, the one who was praised. Abdul Muttalib took his new grandson to Baytullah, and he made dua, and he recited some couplets to say, I praise Allah for giving me this beautiful child, who is blessed and noble. Already in the lap of his mother, he has already become a leader of other children. I put him in the protection of Allah, who is strong and owns the foundation so that he can grow up to become a strong young man. I put him in the protection of Allah from anyone who will have hatred for him, and if anyone tries to approach him. May Allah take his eyes, and may Allah take away his ability to speak all those who try to harm Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so Abdul Muttalib, he pointed to this child and said, you are the one who has been mentioned in the sacred texts of Allah that have been recited through centuries. Your name, Ahmad, has been mentioned throughout generations and throughout time. Again, much of the poetry of Abdul Muttalib is actually an evidence of his monotheism. So Abdul Muttalib, he threw a great feast on the 7th day of the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is now a tradition that even we have in our tradition of Islam called the Aqiqah. So it's a true practice that was inherited from the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam. That on the 7th day of a child's coming into this world, if it's a boy, the family will sacrifice 2 sheep and feed a community. And if it's a girl, the family will sacrifice 1 and feed the community. Now, some scholars say that Abdul Muttalib also saw a dream, and he was informed of the coming of Muhammad ﷺ and to name him Muhammad ﷺ. Muhammad at that time was a rare name, but it was not the first. There's a common misconception that the Prophet ﷺ was the first person to be named Muhammad. This is not true. He was not the first, but it was rare. And when Abdul Muttalib was asked, why did you name your grandson Muhammad? He said that I wanted him to be praised in heaven by Allah, and I wanted him to be praised on earth by his creation. And subhanAllah, look at how his dua came true. That billions across the world praise his grandson every single day. The name Muhammad comes from the root hamd, from bab, taf'eel, like tahmeed. It is an ism maf'ul, which means the one who is repeatedly praised. So the name Ahmad is the one who is abundantly praised. So this is the qualitative aspect, right? That when someone is praising the Prophet, they praise him with the best of praises. And the name Muhammad is that not only amazing things are said about him, but they're constantly said about him. And he was praised even before prophethood. Before prophethood, he was known as As-Sadiq al-Amin, the trustworthy one. And the Prophet ﷺ was known by many names. One of those names is Abu al-Qasim, the father of al-Qasim, his first son. And there's a narration where Rasulullah ﷺ says that give the name after my name, meaning Muhammad. Right? Name as many people as possible Muhammad, but do not give my kunya, Abu al-Qasim. Right? In the sense that I distribute amongst you and disseminate the knowledge. Now, scholars have differences of opinion about what this means. Some scholars say that this only applies during his lifetime, because it needed to be clear who Abu al-Qasim was. So if somebody says that so-and-so, Abu al-Qasim said this, they'll automatically assume it's Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So in order to prevent any confusion, the Prophet ﷺ did not want people to name themselves Abu al-Qasim during his lifetime. Some other scholars say that this only applies if your name is Muhammad too. So for example, someone says, let's say my name is Akram and I name my child Qasim, right? Say Abu al-Qasim said this. And they'll say, Abu al-Qasim who? Akram Abu al-Qasim. But oh, okay, so now it's clear who it is. But if we say Abu al-Qasim, Muhammad Abu al-Qasim, it's still not clear. So somebody might say that, I heard Muhammad Abu al-Qasim say that drinking water before giving halaqah is a blessed thing. And somebody might say, oh, did the Prophet send it or another Muhammad say this? So in order to not create confusion, this is why this was said. So the Prophet is named Muhammad, and there is no more beautiful name than Muhammad. And at that time, as we mentioned, it was a rare name, but now it's the most common name in the world, Muhammad. So much so that if you even go to some places in the subcontinent, or many places in the subcontinent, a lot of people's their name is Muhammad and then something else. They'll name their child Muhammad as the first name, and then something else, right? Muhammad Ashraf, Muhammad Yusuf, Muhammad Hussein, right? Or just Muhammad Hassan. There'll always be something there. There's a weak narration where it's a beautiful narration. Where on the day of judgment, there's going to be an event that occurs. Right? Again, I already prefaced it's weak. Okay? So I don't want any hands be thrown at me after halaqah. That on the day of judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to say, Qum ya Muhammad. Stand up, O Muhammad. And so the Prophet is going to stand up. But so is everybody named Muhammad. Right? Everybody named Muhammad. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, I met my Muhammad, showing the love that he has for Sallallahu, but because of my love for him and that you guys imitated his name and wanted to be like him, then everybody named Muhammad is going to be forgiven on this day. SubhanAllah. Now, if your name is Muhammad, that doesn't mean, okay, now I can go gamble and I can go drink and I can do this and that. No. On the day of judgment, it's very clearly established that you are going to be risen the way you lived. So if you lived like Muhammad, you will be raised amongst the Muhammads. But if you did not live like Muhammad, then it doesn't matter what your name is. It's not going to help you. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Li khamsatul asma." I have 5 names. Ana Muhammad wa Ahmad. We talked about those already. Wa ana al-Mahi. I am al-Mahi, the one who will wipe out kufr. الذي يمحو الله به الكفر. وأنا الحاشر الذي يحشر الناس على قدمي. And I am al-Hashir, the one who will be the first to be resurrected, and the people will begin to resurrect and gather around me. And I am also al-Aqib, which means that there is no prophet after me. So those are the 5 names in which Rasulullah ﷺ says that these are his names. But the most beautiful of them all is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani in his Fath al-Bari, he has a discussion regarding the names of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he says that there is a book that is written by Ibn al-Dihya, who writes that there is 99 names of the Prophet. I mentioned, I think in week 1, that there's this booklet that Sheikh Yusuf Mutala, who was the Sheikh of Mufti Hussein Kamali, one of my teachers, and he wrote this booklet where he pairs a name of Allah with a name of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. 99 names of Allah, 99 names of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So what that is, say, Ya Kareem, Salli wa sallam ala an-nabiy al-wasim. Right? Something like that. And it'll just go down. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was circumcised also on his 7th day. Some scholars actually say that he was born circumcised, and he was born umbilical cord actually already cut. Wallahu ta'ala alam as-sawab. Now, there are many miracles that actually occurred during the birth of the Prophet Muhammad. And I'm going to share these miracles with you today. Now, there are questions about their authenticity. But the main scholars of Seerah, Ibn Ishaq, Ibn Hisham, Ibn Kathir, Qadi Iyad, giant scholars, all found benefit in narrating them, so who am I not to narrate them? So we'll narrate them, inshallah. And one of the objectives of this Seerah class, and doing this dive deep of the Seerah, is to talk about things that we may have never heard before. Talk about things that we may have never come across, because it adds to the richness that is the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So of the many miracles that happened during the birth of the Prophet ﷺ is on the night of his birth, the whole place of Kisra, the Persian Empire, literally shook. The Persian Empire shook. And the shaking was so violent that the palace of the emperor, 14 balconies fell and broke off. The people of Persia were Zoroastrians, right? The Majusi. So they worship a sacred fire. This sacred fire that they worshipped had, by the will of Allah, burnt continuously for 1,000 years and never gone out. On the night that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was born, the fire was extinguished without any explanation. The water levels from the river of Tigris became extremely low, and the irrigation didn't reach the farms. All across the region, there was a bright light shining in the night sky. There was this minister, a wazir. His name was Mubidan. Mubidan was an influential person in the court of the Persian Empire. He had a dream. In the dream of Mubidan, he saw that there was a large, very elder camel, and it was outrunning a young, fast horse. Mubidan also saw in his dream that the Tigris River stopped flowing altogether. So the Persian Empire was experiencing all these things. And so the emperor began to feel nervous, all these events that were occurring. And he gathered his council. And he asked his council, do you know why I gathered you all here today? The central fire that we worship was extinguished last night. The balconies of my palace broke and fell off. Mubidan at that moment, he stepped in and he also accounted his dream. And the emperor of Persia asked Mubidan what his dream meant. And Mubidan said, he was also a dream interpreter. He said, something interesting is happening in the direction of the Arabs. And so the emperor, he sent a man to the direction of Arabia to see what was going on. And the person finds someone on the way. And that someone that he found was somebody named Abdul Masih of the tribe of Al-Ghassan, which bordered the Arabs in Asham. So the Persian man, he asked Abdul Masih, look, the emperor of Persia has sent me to find out what's going on. Something crazy is going on, but I'm not sure what it is. Can you tell me? Abdul Masih, he replies to him, you know, it's very funny that you asked me that. Because literally for the past few days and weeks, almost every leader and every tribe in Arabia and in Syria have come to me asking the very same question. Something is going on in the Hijaz. What is happening? And so some people are hearing things. Some people are dreaming things. Our monks are relating to us prophecies. Something is going on, but I'm actually not completely quite sure. You bring me the same question that I've been receiving for days now, and I myself have that same question. And so the arrival of Rasulullah ﷺ on this earth was causing this unrest and chaos in the minds of all the hearts and people who were ruling over the years and taking advantage of people for so long. And so these people, their rule is about to be tested, and they can feel it, they can sense it, that their oppression is going to end. Not their oppression being oppressed, but them oppressing. And so Abdul Masih, he calls on a kahin, a soothsayer, by the name of Satih. And Satih told Abdul Masih that there will be a prophet of the last times that was born. Sorry, that's the wrong Satih. There's two Satihs. There's this Satih, who is actually a Christian scholar, and there's another Satih who was a kahin. The other Satih comes later, forgive me. Satih, the Christian scholar, was knowledgeable on the Torah and Injil, and he knew a lot about the prophets of the past. So Satih, he told Abdul Masih that the prophet of the last times was born. And Satih went on to say that according to the prophecies, the reign of the Kisra, the Persian Empire, will see 14 more emperors before it came to an end. Hence the 14 balconies falling down. So when Abdul Masih accompanied this Persian messenger and went back to the Persian Empire to tell the emperor about the 14 dynasties, the emperor felt relaxed. So, oh, we're chilling. 14 emperors, a lot's going to happen between that time. There's going to be a lot of emperors. Like between each emperor, there's going to be so many events. And by that time, I'll be long gone. My children will be gone. My grandchildren will be gone. I don't care at that point. It's all right. It's all good. Whatever. But then the messenger told the emperor, no. In 4 years, you will have 10 emperors. And that's exactly what happened. Exactly what happened. 10 emperors came quickly into succession, one after another, in the span of 4 years. And after those 10 emperors, because they kept killing one another, after those 10 emperors, there were 4 more who remained in power until the Khilafah of Uthman ibn Affan, when the Muslims overtook the Persian Empire. There's another story, very interesting story, that you can find narrated in Ibn Kathir's Al-Bidayah wa Nihayah. And it's narrated by Shu'ayb, who narrates from his father, who narrates from his father, who all were Sahaba. It's a rare chain where all 3 generations were Sahaba. And Shu'ayb, Ibn Shu'ayb, an Abihi, an Jaddi. Okay? And Shu'ayb, Ibn Shu'ayb, an Abihi, an Jaddi. So from Shu'ayb, right? From his father, from his, who narrates from his father. So the grandfather of Shu'ayb was passing by a palace, and he met a Christian monk by the name of Isa. And he was from the people of Shem. Now Isa was very well known for his teachings and knowledge of the teachings of the lives of the past prophets. And he was also well known in Mecca for being a very humble and a very generous person. So whenever the businessmen of Mecca would pass by him, Isa would host them, would show them a lot of hospitality. Isa had confined himself to a church most of the time for worship. Now, once a year, this monk would leave the monastery and he would go to Mecca. And he would buy supplies and visit the people in Mecca. He had a lot of old relationships with a lot of the leadership in Mecca. So whenever he visited Mecca, he would say the same thing to leaders there. The people of Mecca, listen, you are very close to a child being born amongst you. The Arabs will follow his deen. He will rule over the non-Arabs. This is his time and his era. Whoever finds him and follows him and believes in him will find him in a strong position. Whoever finds him gets to interact with him, but confronts and opposes him will be in the wrong. I did not leave the palaces of peace, tranquility, and comfort, Ashar, a very prosperous place which was ruled by kings of Ghassan, and come to the land of hunger, of starvation, of civil unrest, and economic uncertainty, except to go find that prophet. I read about him, studied about him, and know that he is going to be here. And that's why I keep coming back to Mecca. That's why I established my monastery right outside of Mecca. You people are very nice, but that's not reason enough for me to move here. I moved here just to meet the Prophet. And every single time there was a child that was born in Mecca, Isa would go there and find out that whether it's the Prophet or not. He would ask about the infant's description. But he wouldn't disclose exactly what he was looking for because he didn't want backlash. But after many years, Isa was about to pass away. And he was very old. So he started to share the markers of what he's looking for to some of the students. Looking for what he's looking for in the Prophet because he was getting older. And he wanted to pass on that knowledge. So there was a Meccan man who was given those markers. And he went to Isa's monastery and he told him of a child that was born that day. And so Isa replied, and he said, today is a Monday. The child will be born on a Monday. Given prophethood on a Monday and die on a Monday. So Isa asked for the child's name and the Meccan man replied, Muhammed. And Isa couldn't contain himself and asked what family was the child born into, and the man said he was born into the family of Banu Hashim. And Isa himself wished that the Prophet would be born to Hashim because that is a family of great stature. So when he heard about this, all these three things coming together, he says, I saw the star in the sky. His narration says this. The same star that shines every time a prophet is born. He was born on a Monday. His name is Muhammed. And Isa then asked to be taken to the child. And once Isa reached there, he said, another sign that this is the Prophet is that the child will suffer for 3 days after his birth, because he will have discomfort from drinking milk for those 3 days. And what's interesting is that there was an evil jinn that knew that the Prophet Muhammad was the messenger. So he stuck his fingers in the mouth of the baby Muhammad so that he would have trouble nursing. And so the angels came, removed the jinn, and protected the Prophet Muhammad, and he was able to drink comfortably after that. Another sign of the Prophet was simple fact that many monks and rabbis would show up to Mecca. And they saw that same star that shined in the sky when Musa was born. So some Jewish rabbis came to some of the Arab leaders of the tribes of Aus and Khazraj and Yathrib, which will be later known as Medina. And they said tearfully, قَدْ ذَهَبَتْ قَدْ ذَهَبَتْ. It has left, it has left. So they were asking, so some of the leaders were asking, what do you mean? Nubuwah has left Bani Israel. Nubuwah is not from the people of Bani Israel anymore. We saw a light emanating from Mecca. We saw a star shining in the direction of Mecca. And it's telling us that the Prophet of the last time has come amongst the Arabs. So prophethood has left our lineage. So some rabbis said that this child carries several signs of prophethood. That he will be a yatim, an orphan, that his father was dead. That on his back, between his shoulder blades, there was a birthmark, like a cluster of moles. And there were even very small hairs growing out of the moles, and this is going to be the seal of prophethood. One of the Jewish rabbis went to Mecca asking about this child born on this night. So he went around from family to family asking which family recently gave birth. And so he went to the home of Amina actually and asked her, did you give birth recently? And she said, yes, I did. And the rabbi said, may I see this child? I mean no harm to you. I just want to see this child. And the rabbi saw that baby Muhammad has the nur of Nabuwah. And then he said, I'd like to see the back of the child. And after Amina showed Muhammad his back to the rabbi, who saw the birthmark of this infant, confirmed that this child will be a prophet, the rabbi said, I hope to live to see the day where this child, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, receives prophethood so that I can come and believe in his message. There's also some of the prophecies from amongst the Christians and the Jews that had survived until that time foretold about the Prophet Muhammad's coming. So the monks and the rabbis, they tried to pinpoint the Prophet Muhammad's birth and lay their eyes upon the child. And the prophets of the past have told us of the foretelling of the coming of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As you mentioned in the beginning in Surah Al-Saf, where the Prophet Isa alayhi salam gave us the bushra of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam being born. So this monk, Isa, this Christian monk, when he was leaving Mecca after seeing and confirming this child to be true, he said, be careful with your tongue. He's saying this to the people of Mecca. No one in history will be envied as much as this child will be envied. No one in history will be attacked as he will be. Listen to me. If you end up getting to see the time when this child will grow up and teach his message as a prophet, and he will call the people, and you will see your people doing things that you could never imagine, honorable, dignified leaders doing reprehensible things, don't go against this child. Be patient and humble yourself before this child. Don't ever say anything against this child. Guard your tongue against him, because your people will say terrible things about him. This child will not live to age the sea of 80. He will die at age 60 in some years. The Prophet ﷺ passed away at the age of 63. And this will be the average age of his ummah. After his birth, Amina nursed him. There was also 3 other women who nursed Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The first of them is Thuwayba. Thuwayba was actually the slave of Abu Lahab. And so Abu Lahab, on hearing the birth of his nephew, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was so ecstatic, was so overjoyed and happy that he freed his slave, Thuwayba. And that moment of love that he showed for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even though later on we'll come to find that Abu Lahab becomes one of the, if not the most staunch enemy. If I'm not mistaken, the only one mentioned by name in the Quran. So every day Muslims are confirming the evil nature of Abu Lahab. Although this is the case, that moment of love that he showed for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after he passed away, there's a narration that tells us, after Abu Lahab passed away, that some of his family saw Abu Lahab in a dream. And Abu Lahab was asked by his family, what did you find? And Abu Lahab said, I have found nothing good, except for a small amount of water. And he made a motion kind of like this, indicating the smallest amount, that I will be given because of that moment that I showed love for Rasulullah and freed Thuwayba. Thuwayba was somebody that had the heart of Rasulullah as long as he lived and as long as she lived. So even during the time when he was in Mecca, after he was married to Khadija radiallahu anha, he would often visit her. He would be very generous and kind with her. When he moved to Medina, he would often send clothes and food for her until he received news that Thuwayba had passed away. The other woman, the second woman other than Amina, who nursed Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was someone by the name Barakah. Her name was Barakah, also known as Ayman, who was an Abyssinian slave who was essentially inherited to the Prophet ﷺ. Right? So she was a servant of Abdullah, the father of the Prophet ﷺ, And after Prophet's father passed away, he inherited the servant of Abdullah, Ayman. Ayman took a motherly role in the life of the Prophet Muhammad and had a lot of love for the Prophet. The Prophet had a lot of love for her. She's also going to be the one who marries Zayd bin Haritha later on in the Seerah, and they'll have a son by the name of Usama bin Zayd, who's a legendary companion. So Ayman has a very critical role in the Seerah, and her name is going to come up multiple times throughout. And the final one is Halima Sa'diyya. And her story is very interesting. So we'll conclude here and talk about her next week, inshallah. Any questions? Sisters, questions? No? Brothers? No questions? Yes.
What was the name of the person that turned the Prophet ﷺ? He was a baby on his back. What was the name?
Allahu Alam, I'm not sure. The narration, Ibn Kathir's Bidayah wa Nihayah just says a rabbi, but there's no specific name that was mentioned in the narration. Any questions online? No? Okay. Yes. Awesome. It's a different incident. The incident of the jinn happened the first 3 days after he was born. So when a child, like his birth. But the incident of Jibreel alayhi salam happened when he was 4 years old. Shaq al-Sadr, which we'll talk about next week because it has to do with the story of Halima Sa'diyya, inshallah. No question.
But whenever we refer to the Prophet ﷺ, we have to say ﷺ.
You should at least make the motion in your mouth, right? So when it comes to any dhikr or even recitation in salah, right? Like you actually need to do the motion with your mouth. You don't want to just do it in the heart, right? Yeah, good question. That doesn't have to be out loud necessarily. Yeah.
The questions were did they go back to the word you from and not a custom within the west of the tree, the printing person?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Brother's asking if after many of these monks and rabbis who came to find that there was a prophet that was born, did they come back and do a council and kind of meet with each other and essentially kind of like start to spread the message and things like that, right? It's a little bit tricky because many of these monks and rabbis that stuck with the original message were kind of already outcasted by their people. The leaders of the Christians and the leaders of the Jews, they didn't want the pure original message because it undermined the oppression that they were causing. So essentially, even if they went out and came to do da'wah, which Allahu Alam if they did or not, they wouldn't have been listened to anyways. And they would have been heavily criticized against. So what seems to happen, well, when we get to the story of Waraq bin Nawfal as well, during the revelation of Prophet ﷺ, most of them kind of lived isolated lives, where they kind of just stuck to themselves. They tried to live their lives by Tawheed as much as possible, lived in monasteries and in the mountains, isolated from society, and just kind of worshipped Allah, right? And many of them did have that desire that if the final prophet comes or Prophet Muhammad ﷺ receives revelation and I'm still alive, then we will go follow him, right?
You mentioned that Salman his mentor basically like told him to go to the city.
No, his mentor passed away. Yeah. So it was while his mentor was on his deathbed that Salman al-Farsi was like, where do I go next? And he said, well, there's no guidance left in this world until the final prophet comes, and he'll come here. And he talked about Medina. Any other questions from the sisters? Okay,
With all the stories you mentioned people are expecting that this child was a prophet. Did it come as a surprise when Prophet got the revelation, or like did anyone say like we knew this was coming or anything like that?
Yeah, good question. So the question is what did it come to a surprise when the Prophet ﷺ received revelation? Couple things here. So first, when it comes to Rasulullah ﷺ receiving revelation from Jibreel alayhi salam, there was a lot of hints and signs that this was going to happen, right? There's a lot of true dreams that he was experiencing months before. He was hearing the rocks saying salam to him. Like he was experiencing these things from childhood, and with Bahira the monk, and which is another story we'll talk about, and all these different miracles that were happening. Shaq al-Sadr, the splitting of the chest, these acts of heroic leadership that Prophet ﷺ showed, like Hifz al-Fudul. There's so many indications that he was going to be a leader, a messenger, a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the shock factor that came when Jibreel alayhi salam came to him wasn't necessarily that the message was revealed to him. It was more the matter of how it was revealed, right? So Jibreel alayhi salam was revealed in his true form to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when Jibreel alayhi salam was revealed in his true form, it was a very intimidating form. And the squeezing of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and things like that, it created this sense of shock in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it was actually very interesting is when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam goes to Khadija radiallahu anha and seeks comfort, right? And he's worried and he's scared and he doesn't know what's happening. Khadija radiallahu anha tells him what? Don't worry, Allah will never forsake you. He has never forsaken you in the past, why will he forsake you now? So it shows in this indication that Khadija radiallahu anha herself even knew that this man was special. There was something special going on here, right? But the matter of how was the shock factor, essentially. Good question. Question online here was the Prophet Muhammad told from childhood that he will be the final prophet? So yeah, that's kind of what we were talking about right now. Yeah. Were there other signs of his prophethood that you didn't already mention? Yeah, there's many signs, right? There's actually a book called Dala'il Nubuwah by Imam Bayhaqi, right? Where he talks about all the different proofs of prophethood. As a matter of fact, Sheikh Muhammad al-Shinawi, okay, from Yaqeen Institute, he has this whole section of Yaqeen Institute called Proofs of Prophethood. And Sheikh Muhammad al-Shinawi has done a masterful job of putting together proofs of prophethood in the English language, better than anybody that I've ever seen so far in the English language, right? So if you want to go there and check out all his stuff, his videos, his articles, his lectures, he even has a book about it, and there's so much detail that is there. All right, last question. Any from the sisters first? No? Okay. Next to you. Yes. Yes, there was. So the question was there any reports from Hashem saying that the palaces were lit up? Yes, there was. Good question. All right. Jazakallah khair, everyone. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Salamun ala mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. كما صليت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وآل محمد كما باركت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. See you guys inshallah ta'ala next week.